Hi, Christina.
Hi. How was your spring break?
So good. So freaking good. We have so much to talk about when it comes to spring break.
Yeah, but that's for another episode because...
Welcome to the watering hole.
Yeah, we are starting off with a bang.
I'm so excited. But
Yeah.
we have a question from last week,
Yeah.
which was a few weeks ago,
A few...
that Stephen left us with.
Yeah. It was, if you have an enemy,
At
your
work.
worst enemy. I don't know if it was specifically at work, but like they're going away. What kind of dessert would you bring for them to kind of dig it to them one last time?
To their potluck going away party.
Yeah, something like that.
I have the worst answer for you.
I don't like that.
So you know how I love me an excuse to make a Midwestern salad?
Yeah.
You ever heard of tuna fish jello salad?
Context, help me.
It
sounds awful.
Gross. It's tuna fish and mayo and sour cream and onions and
Oh, wait, is this the...
lime jello.
Is this the lamb?
Yeah.
Is this the Midwestern mom brought it to some dude's
TV
show?
Yep. That fucking thing. It's so gross, dude.
It's awful.
And I'm so glad I've never had to eat it.
Ah, okay. So you don't know if it's bad because you don't have the experience, but it sounds terrible.
It sounds so... Can you... Does any of that sound good?
No.
No. Fuck no.
That's fair. I'm going to go with mine would be like a cheesecake. But the cheesecake part is toothpaste.
Oh, I hate it texturally and all of the above. Oh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have a pen. I will.
That was very clicky.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. Bye, pen. Rip pen.
I will not stop with. I'm outrageously excited to talk about this watering hole. But
Okay.
Stephen had an answer. Stephen gave me the answer for
his
question.
But he did that on the episode anyway.
Oh, he did. Okay.
Yeah. So
I just outed myself. I haven't listened to it yet. Not for lack of trying. I just keep getting sidetracked.
mm-hmm. That's what all of our listeners say.
All 12 of them, I know.
Yeah.
Okay.
So go
Speaking
ahead.
of worst enemies and terrible people.
Yeah, go ahead and hit me with the watering hole because I know-ish, but not a lot.
How much do you know about Jack the Ripper?
Old psycho. That's all I know. Like death for women. And that was kind of like it was way back in the day.
Yes. So.
And wasn't it prostitutes
Yes.
specifically?
Yes.
And it was London, and that's about all I remember.
Yes. So Jack the Ripper is a famous serial killer,
Right.
who has victims known as the canonical five, which are 5 murders that people think, police at the time and otherwise, think all happened due to one man that they've nicknamed Jack the Ripper.
Right.
And these range from the 31st of August, 1888 to the 9th of November, 1888. Mm-hmm. And there's some other speculation that there's some other murders in there that might be connected, but they never put them in as like for sure victims.
Was he the first serial murderer, or was he like one of the first? Or we're not sure.
I think he's like the first notorious serial killer.
Gotcha.
Like, I don't believe he was like the first one ever, but I think just because of how baffling the story was for the people in, I think the West End is where they were in London, that it just blew their minds, right?
Right.
And so there's a handful of people that are brought as like, this is Jack the Ripper, right? I don't have their names because that is not who we're here to talk about today.
Okay.
I'm here to talk about Edgar Degas, the famous impressionist painter who also did chalk pastels and sculpting.
I don't know how famous he was because
Incredibly.
I have never heard of this man in my life, but I also am not like super in the art world, so that could be just failing on my part.
So Degas was a French impressionist, and he was famous for painting ballerinas. Okay. Ballerinas were his muse. I have a picture pulled up for you here.
I see.
Here's a very important picture for you.
Is that What is behind her?
This back here?
Yeah.
So what you're seeing is the ballerina is front, like, on stage, right?
Uh-huh.
And you're seeing the background of, like, the wings of the stage.
Okay.
And this dark blob right here
Yeah.
is a man talking to a woman here.
Mm.
And he's essentially setting up a meeting with the ballerina after the show, if you pick up what I'm putting down.
Mm. Yikes.
So we'll get into the history of ballet in a little bit. But we're going to talk about Edward Degas for a second.
Yeah, hit me with the knowledge.
Edward Degas was a famous chalk drawing and painter, and he had a progressive disease that caused him to slowly go blind, and it's thought that he had Stargardt's disease.
What's that?
It's a progressive disease in which you go blind.
Oh, God. All right.
So with Stargardt's disease, the area of the brain behind the eyes goes dark, meaning there's no gray matter activity in the orbital frontal cortex or the occipital lobe. The decay of the orbital frontal cortex and the occipital lobe is due to not having visual input.
Okay. So it's more about, it's like a brain problem, not an eye problem specifically.
Correct.
It just happens to be that the eyes are connected to that part of the brain.
Correct.
Oof.
From the accounts of people that knew Edward Degas, he was a terrible, terrible man.
Oh. Well, now I feel less bad for him.
He was a terrible man to be around, and it only got worse as he started to lose his sight. He was a known misogynist and just kind of hated women altogether.
What a guy.
He
would love this podcast.
He often equated women to horses.
What?
Yeah.
I need more information than that.
Like, he saw women the same way he saw horses. Animals used for work, essentially.
Huh. That's... All right. There's so many innuendos and different things, different levels of to go along with that. So,
Degas was also a famous anti-Semite, and he spoke out during the Dreyfus Affair.
The what?
The Dreyfus Affair.
Please explain.
Basically, all Jews are bad.
Oh.
And they're going to burn the world down, more or less. I don't know a whole lot about the Dreyfus Affair, but at the time, London was very anti-Semitic, and France, very anti-Semitic. They did not like Jewish people.
Gross.
Yeah. So Degas was often the subject of gossip, and there are even letters written by Van Gogh to his brother talking about Degas and his hatred of women and Jewish people.
Jeez.
So I firmly believe Edward Degas is Jack the Ripper.
Okay, strictly because he was a jackass?
I've got so much information for you.
Okay.
The theory was first brought to me by Kiki Shri Genius on TikTok. Like, she's who I found. So all credit goes to her for most of this research.
Okay.
And it is insane.
He is or it is?
All of the above.
Okay. Great.
So Degas, at the time of the murders, was in his early 50s, and he still had sight. His sight was going. So he often hung out at night and under stage lights and things like that because it was easier for him to see and communicate with people that way.
Okay.
Degas lived in Paris, which was only somewhere between 300 and 400 miles away from where the murders took place in London.
Oh.
Paris to London via train at the time was a trip Degas made often in order to have lunch and meetings with fellow artist Whistler of Whistler's mother. That's this woman right down here that I have pulled up for you. That's Whistler's famous painting.
Oh, okay.
So all the people in the art world at this time were, like, really connected. So he often went to have lunch with Whistler. This kept going until after the murders started. And it wasn't until a couple years later where Whistler wrote to Degas and asked why he stopped coming around.
Oh.
Another weird coincidence with this is Degas kept very, very detailed records and diaries up until 1888, which is when the murders happened. So it's kind of a weird coincidence that Degas was this very detail-oriented person, and then the murders started happening, and he just stopped writing about his life.
Yeah, that is
and he lived until 1917.
That is a little strange, like the timing of everything.
Very strange. So we're going to go back to Degas for a little bit here. And I think it's worth noting that, you know how I said the brain part is dormant behind the eyes.
Yeah.
Studies in the last 20 years or so have shown that in serial killers, that part of the brain is also dormant.
Oh.
And they are thinking it can lead to like lack of decision making and impulse control.
Oh.
Which doesn't help.
No.
Anything. So, Degas and Ballerinas, this is where it gets really freaking weird.
Yeah, I think I need to know more information about why ballerinas.
So, Degas' muse was ballerinas. He painted them, he made chalk drawings of them, and he even sculpted them. But there's a darker side. Ballerinas at the time were also, in most cases, working prostitutes or sex workers. And it was often that their mothers were the ones orchestrating the sale or the meetings in order to fund their art.
Oh my God.
Ballet during the day, sex work at night in order to be able to support themselves.
Had no clue. Had no idea. Wow.
So it said that Degas liked to capture the background, this in the backgrounds of his pieces. Like you can see here, this man is talking to this woman while her daughter's on stage.
Gross.
Yeah.
So gross. So gross. Ooh, no, I don't like that.
It's also important to know later when we start analyzing Degas' work with how it's like dark and murdery. All of the darkest parts of the paintings are the men and the slash mark ribbons around their necks.
Oh.
Which is all of Jack the Ripper's victims were slashed through the throat.
Huh.
Which is creepy and gross, and I didn't like it.
Yeah.
So Degas watched the men who watched the dancers, and then he painted them. He did not paint male dancers.
Huh.
He only painted female ballerinas.
Huh.
But he did not see them as beautiful or seductive. Seductive? Seductive, that's the word. Thank you. He saw dancers are bodies and machines. They're not... he has art where they don't focus on the faces. Like, he's trying to draw you... Like, it's not about the facial expression. It's not about sex appeal. He wants you to look at the struggle in these women.
Okay.
And there's so much like voyeurism that he liked to paint people. He painted people that they didn't know he was watching. So he would go to the ballet, watch the ballet, and paint them afterwards.
Oh, good.
Here's where it gets so much worse.
Oh, good. I was, just thinking to myself, wow, this is tame.
So
that was sarcasm.
This statue here, entitled Little Dancer of 14 Years, is the only one of Degas' statues to be displayed during his lifetime. And it's really fucking creepy.
Just looking at it, or there's more information?
There's more to it, but looking at her, she's not happy.
No, the whole thing's a little off-putting.
So the girl who modeled for the statue at the time was 14. Okay. And shortly after the statue went on display, the little girl disappeared from history. Basically, she modeled for this statue, and then a couple of years later, her and her older sister were trying to flee the country of France. Okay. Her older sister committed a robbery in order to pay to get them across the border, and they were stopped at the border of France, and not long after that, she disappeared. There's no record of what happened to her after that. Okay. Her name was Marie Van Gotham, and there is a whole book by Camille Laurens. The book is called The Little Dancer of 14 Years, all about Marie Van Gotham, who posed for this. Okay. But here's where it gets worse. So you see how the statue is dressed in a costume? Yeah. That's not sculpted. That's like an actual honest-to-God costume.
Yeah, it looks like it's just a fabric.
It's because the original sculpture was erected without one, and the young girl who posed for it posed in the nude for Degas. Ugh. Yeah. And so...
You didn't tell me I was going to feel achy afterwards. After this episode at all.
I'm so sorry. Ugh. It's only going to get worse, my friend.
Oh, no. Okay. Oh, God.
Most of society hated the piece, and they were shocked and offended. And after this, he stopped displaying his pieces, but he never stopped making statues. Instead, he often unmade and remolded statues in the privacy of his own studio. His statues were made out of wax, and I need you to remember that because that's important. It'll come back to us.
Okay.
So wax during this time was not used for art. it was typically used to preserve organs.
Oh. See, I thought wax and, light. Like, it's for
Candles
lighting
and
purposes,
things.
yeah.
They used it for that too, but it was for autopsies and things of that nature.
Great.
Little Dancer has been x-rayed and is full of, quote, organic material. But they have not cut her open to figure out what the organic material is.
Yeah, it's because everybody's grossed out by the idea of what it could possibly be. I don't need... Nope.
Yep. So, going to Jack the Ripper here. The murders took place in London in 1888. There are 5 known victims that belong to Jack the Ripper, known as the Canonical Five. This case will likely never be solved due to forensics and the fact that a lot of physical evidence has disappeared over the years.
Okay.
All 5 victims were women who worked as prostitutes, and one of them had organs missing. Specifically, the uterus. There's no evidence of sexual assault when it came to the victims. Jack the Ripper was thought to have been studying bodies.
Oh.
So there's this fun little thing called the Golston Street Graffito, which it's an anti-Semitic piece of writing found on a wall above a chunk of bloody apron that belonged to one of the victims on the 30th of September 1888, the night of the double murder. So there's no photo, but police copied down just as well as they could, and they also tried to mimic handwriting. The inscription read, quote, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." It was written in chalk on the wall. The reason this is so compelling is the way he spelt Jews was not in a way an English speaker in London would have spelled Jews. He spelt it Jeuwes, which is very French.
Okay. Yeah.
And as a native French speaker, having the double negative makes sense, but it is not an English grammar pattern. An interesting thing about the double murders is they were thought to be anti-Semitically motivated. Elizabeth Stride was murdered outside of a meeting attended by mostly Jewish men. It was a radical group at the time.
Oh.
And it is thought that she was possibly killed because she might have been servicing Jewish men, or because Jack the Ripper wanted to make a statement about being anti-Semitic. Not great.
Yeah, no.
So here's where it gets weird.
Okay.
With it possibly being Degas, right?
Okay.
So during a couple of the murders, technically Degas was not, quote, in London. He was said to be in respite and wrote many long poetic letters to his friends and the town society gossips, detailing prearranged plans and talks of weather. He was basically in respite in the mountains, but there's no actual log of him ever being there. What's strange is that Degas was writing these long letters to people that he had never written to before, as well as people he did not write often. They also contained details such as shows and things that had been prearranged knowledge for the general public. So events that were happening that people just knew about. So it was easy for Degas to say, "Yes, I was there. It was lovely." And kind of ramble on and try and guide attention away from the fact that he wasn't actually there.
Okay.
So there's no evidence that Degas was actually where he said he was, which is gross and weird.
Yep.
Degas was quoted as saying he wanted to know how every muscle and sinew worked. He wanted to deconstruct a body to know the mechanisms of the movement of the female animal.
Sir.
Degas also attended many human dissections during his time in art school and studied physical anatomy, and he was well versed in the makings of the human body. His only interest in women were how they worked. He was never known to be like a womanizer or a man of women. He was only focused on the anatomy of it, essentially. And it is said that Jack the Ripper had to have a understanding of anatomy based on how he killed his victims. So, Mary Jane Kelly was victim number 5, and it was estimated that she was mutilated for roughly 2 hours. The killer spent 2 hours with her, which is roughly the amount of time it takes for rigor mortis to set in. Rigor mortis is the body getting stiff after death.
Right.
After that, the movement of the body would be unnatural and would only stiffen with time. It was likely a full-on dissection to see how the body moved. If it was Degas, and his whole purpose was to see how bodies moved, once rigor mortis set in, he'd have no purpose of being there.
Pretty gross.
It's not great. So, technically, Degas has an alibi. I don't love it. because he was in the Paradise Mountains convalescing, you know.
Yeah, but like
from the end of August to mid-September. And he wrote the letters to friends, but...
I mean, that's the only evidence? There's no other
that's it.
Physical evidence that he was there.
And here's the weird thing about the letters. Between 1880 and 1887, Degas averaged 2 letters a month. He wrote 14 letters on his 19-day sabbatical, essentially.
Jesus. And, like, he's a visual artist. He's not, like, a man with words.
No.
So, like, that's a little odd.
Yeah.
Like, maybe he was multi-talented or something. But maybe that's a little weird. I don't know.
Here's another weird thing.
Okay.
One of the victims was murdered with a knife called a slicing knife, which is a tool commonly used by candle makers for cutting wax. And it's plausible that Degas had one of these because he sculpted in wax. And with the Golston Street Manifesto, graffito, it was written in chalk. He was a chalk artist.
Right.
So he has all these things like stacking up against him, and they're kind of messed up.
Yeah. It's very small breadcrumbs here and there that are just sprinkled in that you're like, oh, that's kind of weird, but like, I guess that's a weird coincidence. But you say that so many times and then it's like, okay, what's going on?
Yeah. So Marianne Nichols was the first victim. She was a prostitute and she had her throat slashed multiple times down to the spine. And she also had many abdominal injuries.
Jesus Christ.
Annie Chapman was the second victim. She was a prostitute. She also had her throat cut and she had her body mutilated in many different ways.
Dude.
Just to see how different parts functioned. We're guessing. Elizabeth Stride was also a prostitute. She had her throat slit but no other injuries, and it was thought that Jack the Ripper was interrupted during this murder. Oh. This was the night he killed 2 victims. Catherine Eddowes was the second victim of that night, and she was mutilated and missing organs.
Jesus.
Mary Jane Kelly was the worst, though. She was mutilated beyond recognition in her own home.
Oh, my God.
She had parts of her body removed and placed in the room around her, like completely separated from her body.
Okay.
The reason that they are attributing all of these victims to being Jack the Ripper, so Dr. Thomas Bond is the one who handled the autopsies for each woman, like all 5 of these women, and it is thought that the way that the cuts line up and things like that, the knife was held by the same hand, essentially.
Okay.
Is what they're saying.
Okay.
So, it's kind of icky and terrible.
Uh-huh. Not kind of.
All of these little things adding up. Doesn't make me feel good.
Yeah, I know far more about this subject now than I thought I was going to know. And Wow, this is gross, dude. This is, in various levels. It's not only like, oh, you're going to do that to a person, but also like, your mentality's icky too. Like the whole thing, everything, every possible way it could be icky, it's icky.
Yeah. So let's just break it down for a minute.
Break it down for me.
Even if he's not Jack the Ripper, which I think he is, just because the timeline's too weird.
Okay.
He also had friends in London. His name is escaping me, but during the times of the murders, he knew so many people that while other people were traveling, he had places to stay in London.
Okay.
Without checking into hotels and things of that nature.
Right, so he didn't have to actually put his name down anywhere.
Correct. This is Degas, by the way. I forgot to point that out. The guy on the top left.
That's the sick mother.
Yeah.
He looks familiar. I don't know why he looks familiar, but he does.
Because it's kind of done in the style of Shakespeare, probably. And
yeah,
you're probably thinking, gross. So, Going Blind. Awful person, anti-Semitic misogynist.
Mm-hmm.
Really into voyeurism when it comes to watching people and painting people that did not know he was there nor did consent to be painted.
Mm.
It took Degas hours to sculpt a child of 14 years, and she was naked the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
That's fucked up.
Yeah.
And the pose in which she's standing in had to be excruciatingly painful. Like, just to stand like that still for a couple hours, or like 20 minutes, let alone hours.
Yeah. I mean, like any pose.
Any of it.
Standing for that long is too much.
Yeah. The fact that he was anti-Semitic and some of the murders were thought to be religiously motivated.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that the Golston Street graffito was done in chalk. if he was a chalk artist and he was creating all the time, he would have chalk on him.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a far stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
Neither would it be a far stretch of the imagination for him to have a slicing knife that was used for candle making.
Yeah.
I hate that that's what it's called, too.
Yeah.
But
gotta come up with something nicer sounding, but...
And the fact that the letters that he wrote, he was writing to people he never wrote to.
Yeah.
And he could have traveled there or just sent the letters to the hotel because it was a business.
Yeah.
And say, hey, I will pay you. Just mail these letters over an incremental amount of time.
Right. But then at that point, wouldn't there be some sort of a paper trail saying that he made a deal of that nature?
Unless he went out there himself, stayed a couple days, and came in.
It's possible.
Came back. Like, it was only a couple hours to and from.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
On the train, so...
But then if that's the case, he could have actually have stayed there, but then just...
That's true.
He could have done both. He didn't necessarily...
He could have pulled a Where the Crawdads Sing on him.
I don't know what that means.
It's a book or a film you need to consume. If he is Jack the Ripper, and the fact that Degas' paintings are so famous... I learned about Degas when I was like 10.
And
when we started learning about artists.
Did you learn about all of his creepy past? Or
no.
It was just strictly
the art.
Look at how pretty he can make a ballerina.
It's the art.
It was that.
It was the art. It was when we were learning about impressionist artists and then going on and so forth, because he was very, very big and famous for his time. He was not a well-liked man, but he did, quote, good art, subjectively speaking.
Okay.
People still have Degas, like, paintings and stuff. Like, not originals or anything, but hanging up, like, in their children's nurseries and stuff.
Oh.
I knew people who had Degas up in their house.
Huh. If that's you, take it down. You don't want your kid having inspiration.
One, it's just horrible. But two, can you even imagine if, like, this was true?
I'm just trying to imagine.
I'm not here to talk you into it or talk you out of it or whatever you want to call it, but...
I mean, a lot of things are making sense, for sure. I'm mostly trying to imagine him, everything that he stands for and everything, today.
Ugh.
Yeah. And the thing is...
He'd have a podcast.
Yes, he would. He'd be a psycho, but people would listen to him, and people would love him. And that's scary.
At least when it comes to the criminal activity of... I'm calling it criminal activity of sculpting an underage girl.
It is, yeah.
Prison.
Yeah.
Prison for you, Degas. There's also, this is going to be a really sidetracking thing. I also saw a TikTok about Degas, or about somebody who lives in what used to be Degas' studio in New Orleans.
Oh, gross.
And they're saying it's haunted.
It's haunted?
Yeah, they're saying it's haunted and that it's really they have really creepy, bad vibes about living in this studio.
Oh, no.
But can you imagine? Like, if he was making and unmaking these statues, and there's organic material in there, why do you think he was making and unmaking them?
I already took a shower today, ma'am.
He had no children, and so the estate went to his family. This statue here is one that they cast in bronze, and they cast it as many times as they could in bronze and sold it. So you can see them. Like, they still exist.
Oh, okay.
And
I wouldn't want to. You know, all of his stuff is it feels gross.
Yeah.
Even without knowing if there's organic material in there or not.
She looks still miserable.
Yeah, I mean, I can't see like super fine details, but I can see that. Oh God, okay, you zoomed in. Whoo boy. Yeah, she does not look very good. She doesn't look happy about this. She looks like she's actually
in pain.
She kind of looks like she's got a gun to her head.
Yeah. But this is the expression on all of their faces. So Degas believed in this weird psycho theory that has a name that I blocked it because I was like, that's really stupid. Where he believed that you could look at the structure of the bones and determine if somebody was going to be like a psychopath, essentially.
Oh.
And he believed, and I hate it so much, that the people who, like a certain bone structure that you would associate with folks today who have Down syndrome are people who would be very into criminal activity and would have a lot of problems. And he liked seeing this visual pain, and so a lot of these women are painted to mimic that bone structure. That is not what the little girl Gotham actually looked like. He altered her facial expression and her bone structure in order to capture his vision.
Gross.
Because he wanted them to look more psychotic.
Wow. Because women are the worst.
Yeah.
And let's paint them as so. Literally.
And tortured, and they are a machine. They are like animals. They are not on the same level, essentially, in his belief system.
Because, I mean, like, at the time, women were not equal to men.
No.
At all. In any stretch of the imagination to anybody that was living at the time. But to lower them so much to where they're an animal, they're someone that should feel pain. And it should be expressed that they're in pain.
Yeah. But, like, I want you to look at, like, how they have such focus, like, on their necks. It's freaky. Like,
because all I've seen two works. Like, in the sculpture, is there something going on with her neck? I know she's elongating her neck.
She's elongated, but it to the point where it almost looks painful. Doesn't it, a little bit?
I can see,
and you can
like,
see
some...
the tendons and
they're, like,
makings.
They're stretched a little bit. Interesting. It's awful, but it's interesting how much detail he went into to specifically make it to where it was like, now that you know this information, it's glaringly obvious.
The darkest parts. Like, they all have this, like, very similar bone structure.
Yeah. And
they all have the darkened pieces around their necks.
Yeah, hold on. So, the woman on the left and this one that you're showing me right now, I'm assuming she is the mother, because there's nothing going on around her neck.
That would be a fair assumption.
Because
this, to me, looks like a full-on, like, slice mark, though.
Because, like,
she's in a ballet outfit.
So far, what you've shown me, they've all been brunettes. Mm-hmm. They're the ballerinas when they have the neck situation. Yeah. Are they all brunettes?
His victims?
Yeah.
That I don't know.
Well, what about all of his paintings, too? That we can...
A lot of them.
Like, we can't look at all of his work, I'm assuming.
No, he's got thousands.
But more brunettes.
More brunettes. The darkened pieces. Even when they don't have the ribbon, they're shadowed really, really dark, too.
Yeah.
But even, like, when they're not on stage, when they're in rehearsal, their bodies are meant to look like machines. They're not meant to...
Right. And then the men are just, like, you can see their facial expressions.
Yep. And they have different facial expressions and different bone structure. All of the women have the same bone structure.
Yeah.
In this, like, weirdly obsessive way.
Wow. So he literally looked at women and said, you're all the same. Mm-hmm. You're not a person. You are all exactly the same. You're a monster. You're an animal. You're a robot. You all function and look the exact same, and you're all gonna be portrayed the same.
Like, that is the same facial expression.
Yeah.
And the same, like, neck pieces. Like, he's very focused in on these very, very specific details.
Yeah.
And
he even has, like, jewelry on her arm.
Yeah.
Like, he's down to certain details, and others he's just not.
Tell me that doesn't look like...
Oh, she's got blood all over.
All
yeah,
over
for sure. Like, that's what I thought was going on at first, and then I saw her head crown thing, and yeah, this is really messed up.
They're never looking at him.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
The ones where it looks like they would be, their eyes are closed.
Oh.
They're never seeing him.
So that goes with the whole, like, he just watches them and then shows it later. Hold on, so that one, let's look at that one real quick. See, they don't have anything around their necks. They're not looking at him, but they don't have anything around their necks, and...
Because I don't think that's the focus.
Is the focus that they're all the same?
I think that they're all the same, and that they don't need to have a face. That's not their purpose.
Their purpose,
and
like,
all
their
of
body is the purpose.
Yes, exactly.
And that's the only thing that matters when it comes to, oh, Oh,
and all of their bodices have this weird darkening down the front.
I just assumed it was like shadowing, but you're right.
It could be, but that's on like the top of like where the light would catch, I would think, right there.
I don't know, maybe...
But it's dark.
Maybe it's dark because, like, men don't have breasts.
Maybe.
So he was like, we have to emphasize them to a degree because that's what's important when you look at women.
Yeah. I know this is going to be hard for the listeners.
Yeah.
Basically, they're all kind of creepy.
Yeah.
And people are hanging these up in little girls' rooms.
Nope. Mm-mm. Nope. Don't do that. Don't fucking do it.
So how do you feel about the theory?
I feel like no
it's
matter
icky.
what. Yeah. No matter what, he's fucked up, dude. But whether he was just the guy that watched, or whether he was actually a man of action, and he actually like went forward with his thoughts. Yeah. And he was an action guy rather than an observant party who just showed what he watched. I don't know. I don't like it either. He's creepy. Yeah. He's entirely too creepy. He should not have existed. He should never had a platform at all.
You're not wrong.
But I think it comes down to if he was capable of doing something like that. Like, yes, he's a fucked up individual, but can he actually do anything with it?
Right.
Or is he just an incel?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know which one it is.
But I'm okay with not knowing.
Yeah, 100%. But it's a really good theory, honestly.
It is. Kiki, sure genius on TikTok. You should go check out. She's got like a 12-part series out right now about it.
Damn.
And it is compelling, to say the least. And she talks about like analyzing handwriting and all this stuff. It's wild. Wow. Wild ride. So go check her out if TikTok still exists.
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
Because that's other news that we could talk about in another episode, I guess.
I know I should leave this with a question.
But it seems entirely too fucked up a subject to, like, pull something from that. So...
This isn't, like, for the general, but, like, you know how a lot of these famous artists were really radical in their beliefs? Yeah. Like, Salvador Dali was a Nazi. Uh-huh. So, like, share with us your favorite, like, non-troublesome artist.
Do those exist?
I'm sure they do.
Finding one will be very, very hard.
Yeah, but let's go with that. Share with us your least troublesome artist, and we will talk to you later.
All right.
Go have a shower. Sleep well.
Honestly.
Love you. Bye.
Love you. Bye.